Hi, good morning. You know, the reason why I go on about censorship so much is because it affects a lot more than just what's being talked about at this very point in time. It affects what the future will read about this era that we're living in right now. I'll give you a few examples. They're not going to know what took place during this era, that when we went through COVID pandemic. They're not going to know things like this, that people were threatened that they would lose their job, and some people were fired for not taking a vaccine. I know someone that was on board the Queen Elizabeth aircraft carrier, and they said, if you don't take the vaccine, you're not coming on board. And he said to someone I know that it was better than going AWOL, because, you know, if they're the ones throwing him off the boat for that, and he don't have to go back there, then, you know, it's all well and legal. And of course he refused to have it, and he was refused also to go back on the aircraft carrier. And 6 months later, this was changed. They weren't just doing it to people in the, the forces. They were doing it to nurses as well, as we already know that, don't we? But what I'm saying is, in 40 years' time, there'll be a new generation reading the news on the pandemic, which took place late 2019, lasted for a couple of years, and it won't be what was actually, they will not get any sense of what it was like to actually live through it. Like, you know, the British government said you can go out for 2 walks a day, an hour each time, but you're not allowed to have social interactions with people. You know, there was a number of people, I think it was like 8 people, you weren't allowed to have any more than that in a group at one time. What was Boris Johnson doing? Oh, that's one of the things that will be rubbed out of the future recordings of COVID. It'll be Boris Johnson having his party with all his friends, drinking wine, glugging it back, and, you know, obviously more people than the quoted amount from his own mouth that we should be having. You know, they won't be talking about the ridiculousness of these plastic sheets they made all the shops put up. You know, because COVID knew that, you know, the sheet only went up a metre high, and of course COVID couldn't go over that sheet because it was intelligent. They won't know this in the future, and these are the things that are being rubbed out from, you know, what actually took place. And what makes matters even worse is that we don't have reporters anymore that are investigative reporters. And if they don't insist that we record the truth right now, the perception in the future will not be the truth. And a good example of this is what happened recently with X. Something to do with Israel and Gaza. X was shut down. It was the Grot, is it their their version of the AI? Then, when it came back online after it being shut down, had a different version of that event that it was saying before. It was regulated. This is a perversion of what our future are going to be reading about and not knowing the truths of. I'll go back to the COVID crisis. You know, people aren't going to know that there were pensioners that had been married all their life and they were not allowed to be next to their partner whilst they passed away. I remember seeing pensioners being behind locked gates in the caring home, and their partner on the one side of the fence sitting on a chair a metre away from their other partner. No contact. You know, and they lost their loved ones. That is one of the things that is going to be rubbed out from our history, and people will not know what we went through in 2020. They're not going to know that Boris Johnson in the future started the Ukraine war off by convincing the President Zelensky that he must attack Russia and defend his nation, defend his territory, because if he doesn't, other people around the world will think they can do it. And that's exactly what we've got going on now. You know, other countries now are testing the boundaries because of what Russia's been allowed to get away with, what Israel's been allowed to get away with, and now they're trying it on in Thailand and in the Congo. You know, this is wrong for the reasons that, you know, when you record history, it should be as recorded as accurately as what they're called, an historian would record it. and not just a historian. If we, you know, the people, and like an archaeologist would record it as accurate as that and as honest as that, because then, you know, mistakes in the future can be avoided. That's why you shouldn't censor anybody. That's why you should uphold freedom of speech. That's why you should uphold democracy, because lessons will be forgotten when you change the way people record the information on the event. I could go on. I mean, you know what they do? They put things in blind sight. Now, if you look at this, is the British government emblem, yeah. And there's a couple of things, you know, I've been talking today with a friend, and a couple of things I brought up is the lion represents the military might, I think it is, or the arms in London, yeah. You can look it up, you'll find out. And we have that mystical creature on the right, the unicorn, and they say that that represents Scotland. But where is the animals then in this case that represents the other two parts of Britain that were made up on? I'm talking about Ireland and Wales. And the other thing is, why is only one of those animals there when, in my view, the lion should be the one with the chains or the shackles round it, because that's the more dangerous creature. But why has the unicorn got the shackle on it? Tell me that. Where are the representations on this that represent, you know, Britain? Do they not include Wales in this? Why has no one from Wales ever brought this to the attention of the British government or the English government and said, hold on a minute, you know, you're treating us unfairly here. This isn't equality. You're only representing Scotland and yourself. What about representing Wales and Ireland in this emblem? Make it fair. On the bottom it says in French, Duot et Mondurot, which means something, if I can remember correctly. What does it mean? It means my God and my right in French. Again, why is it written in French? Why isn't it written in English? If this is the English emblem for the government, why is it representing Scotland with a chain round it, being shackled, and not the lion? And why is it writing it in French and not English? Answer these questions. They put things in front of your eyes. And I bet you that this emblem doesn't mean what we are led to believe it means. It could mean something very sinister. It could mean that the lion represents the ruling of a lion, the king of the animal world, and will do it in the way of the mythical creature. Treat everybody like they're idiots, and let's put the unicorn on there, which is an animal that does not exist in this world. It doesn't, and never has done. Yet, why are these things not questioned? Another thing, I'm on one today, and you know, check me on these things I'm talking about. Tell me if I'm wrong about mentioning any of this. But I don't think there should be censorship, for the simple fact it won't be recorded as it is in the future. It will not be recorded as it is. No one will remember the Epstein files in 50 years' time, because they was never released. And they will never know what went on with the government today in relationship to not releasing them, because these things are getting rubbed out as we go along, week by week. No one will know anything about them. And I'll give you a good classic example of how things change over just a decade. Have a look at a guy in the UK, he was knighted, Sir Jimmy Savile. Have a look at the articles that were published in 2012 and compare on Jimmy Savile, and then compare them to the articles that was published in 2024. If you've got nothing to do today and you want to test what I'm saying as true or not, and how they cover up the things of the past, then test them. Have a look at those articles and see how much it's changed. Jimmy Savile was a notorious paedophile. Jeffrey Epstein was charged because he was a paedophile. And Gillian is in jail because she masterminded the organising of these underage children. And, you know, I could mention another member of the royal family that was connected to, and you know who I'm talking about, don't have to mention the name, connected to Jeffrey Epstein. There was a court case that was settled out of court without the verdict. And that will be something that won't be recorded in the British history of the monarch. And my point is this: what you are feeding the future people that are interested in the true facts of this history that we are taking part in right now will not be true, because the amount of manipulation that has been caused by it, and that is criminal. It is one of the worst crimes you can do, because you are making a unicorn out of the history of any country in this world when you manipulate the truth and you censor it. And I don't think that they're smart enough to realise this. They're not smart enough to realise this. I want to ask a question. Why is one of the two most important people in the conflict of Ukraine and Russia not being there tomorrow in Alaska? Why is somebody from America there representing who? I don't know. Is he representing... He's part and parcel of this war? I don't know. It's not been made clear, has it? Why isn't Vladimir Zelensky there? What's the reason? What are you going to tell us? What the mainstream media? Oh, Putin and Zelensky don't get on, so it can't. It's not this negotiations of this are not going to work out too well because the two of them don't like being in the same room tomorrow. Let me tell you something. If you think what the outcome of tomorrow's meeting will be with Trump and Zelensky, Putin, will be something that's generated from tomorrow, you're wrong. There was a couple of news articles I brought even to your attention a few weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, and I said, hold your horses. If Donetsk is being evacuated, that means that those people will never be going back. And it was already decided then what territory Putin would be satisfied with as for the sake of a ceasefire. And pretty much it's 20% of the landmass of Ukraine, and it covers most of the south. And it's what President Putin set out to do from day one, and he's achieved it. And Europe have failed. And I want to say something a minute about that. But he has absolutely succeeded. If that's what the outcome is, he gets Crimea and he gets that land border that protects all the way from Russia border to Crimea, then he's won. And what does that message send to the rest of the world's leaders when they want to do the same? They want to steal and encroach on a bit more land. This won't be something that's recorded accurately in 40 years' time. They'll be reading a completely different story. They're going to make COVID sound like a common cold. You know, and I think people are waking up to all this nonsense. You know, I'm not going to mention the names of these companies that manufactured these vaccines, but they didn't work. In a lot of incidences, they did not work. So if they didn't work, and at the time they was manufacturing them, their share prices quadrupled, went up over 100%. Yeah, massive profits was made. If they didn't work, why ain't the British government and other governments around the world asking for the money back? Why, I don't know whether it was the case in other countries, why were these manufacturers of the vaccine given immunity from being sued if they caused injury by these vaccines? Why did a government allow a vaccine to be created in 9 months actually? Why did our government allow a company to manufacture a vaccine and only test it for the period of 9 months and not 10 years like it's normally made out to do? It's because they wanted to get in quick on it, make the money, and they made trillions out of that. They made trillions out of the war with Ukraine. Boris Johnson went straight over there, don't sign any peace agreements, protect your territory, we'll support you with the weapons you need. Millions and billions of pounds worth of anti-tank weapons went over to Ukraine straight away. Couldn't get them over there. If they put them on a spaceship, they were put straight on C-130s, I don't know, whatever, Super Hercules, and sent straight over there. Crate loads of weapons. Did that money ever go back into the taxpayer's purse? I'm telling you now, what I'm most angry about is the censorship. And it's wrong, because in the future, people are going to see a different past. And it will be all rubbed out to make future governments look better. And better right now. And it's something that's being done right now. We don't have equality when it comes to reporting anymore. It's usually a threat by the government. You'll lose your charter, or will impose licenses on you if you don't do what we tell you to do. They've done it. They've proved it with what they did with Russell Brand. Ministers approached YouTube, said demonetise him. You think I don't know that they've done the same to me? You think, anyone stupid can look at the views that I get now, compare it to 2 years ago, and it's only because I've touched on controversial subjects like this that they've did it. What is their pattern and their first tool they use? Discredit. Call him a conspiracy theorist. Okay, I was talking about cloud seeding 10 years ago. Now the government are doing it. They're investing £850 million, the British government, in trying to dim the sun out using cloud seeding. So, 1 minute they're calling you a conspiracy theorist, next minute they're calling you, they're saying you were right. So the second thing they do, first of all, they can't beat you by discrediting you and calling you such names that they invent, like conspiracy theorist. What do they do next? They go after your money. If they can't stop you there, when you've got no coins in your pocket and they've bankrupted you and you can no longer have a job in any sector, because they will, and I'm going to tell you another story as well. What do they do next? They accuse you of a sexual crime. They dig up all your past. Look at what they've done to Russell Brand, all 3 of those. And what's those brothers' name that are living in Europe at the moment? I forget their names. 2 brothers. One's Christian, and I can't remember the other one. The more famous one as well. I should do. But they've done the same to them guys. They went and seized the money. They seized the cars. They seized their assets. And then they brought up these charges. This is disgraceful behaviour on the part and parcel of governments. Now, I was watching a Tucker Carlson, a Young Turks interview the other day, and they got this woman that was a senator, I think, of a particular state, and she was threatened by 2 other senators, and she knew that there was disliked by a lot of others over supporting Israel with their weapons. Yet she passed, I think, 2 parts of it, but Israel come back for a 3rd part. She told us on this interview that they wanted the money for the batteries, and it weren't a small amount. We're talking batteries, that you put in things and they run without having to plug the electric in. That sort of battery, not a weapons battery, not like a Patriot battery. We're talking just that, batteries. And it was to the tune of tens of millions of pounds they wanted. And she said, no, I'm not going to sign this. This has gone on too far. We're here in this government to serve the American people, and that's what we should be doing, not serving the interests of a foreign country. Now, do you know about APEC? Do you know about all the European Union and the United Nations? They all have one thing in common. They lobby people in government. They give them a script and they give them money. And if they say that you're against that script, like they did this woman, I think she might have been a congresswoman or senator. I'm not sure which one it is, but you can find it on Young Turks. They discussed it a few days ago. They said to her, if you don't fall in line, not only we will not give you money like we're giving everybody else. I think 80% of Congress and senators get paid off by OPEC or APEC, whichever it is. They said not only will we not give you money like we're giving all the others, we will actually invest millions on removing you from your position. And that's what they told her. 2 6-foot men sat either side of her and bullied her. And that's against the rules of governance for that to allow. And she could have brought complaints about these people. She could have named the people, but she never. But clear to me, you know, I know a person, when I'm listening to one that's being honest, and who couldn't possibly imagine such a story to make up. But that's what we're living. That's what we're living with. Lobbyists. And I think slowly but surely people are waking up. But it's going to be slowed down with these dirty dogs using tricks like censorship. And I've just explained what the worst parts about censorship are, is how history gets recorded now and how it gets interpreted in 40 years time and 50 years time. That's if we're alive. Because let's face it, what's going on in this world sucks, doesn't it? The cost of living is what really infuriates most people, because it directly comes straight into your kitchen when you're sitting there with your family on the evening having a meal. And you know what, some of the nights of the week it has to be a pizza, a homemade one, not one brought from the shop. It has to be something on the cheap, just so that you can make your coffers, your coins in your purse or your wallet, go that little bit further. So when I say to people on my channel, right, have you seen what they've done to the channel, YouTube, which is very likely orchestrated by the British government, who have lobbied them to do it? That's why you should support it. You should like it. You should subscribe, click the notification bell. And I've never asked people to do this, but we are at war with them. And we are challenging them directly now. And that's why we have to stick together. And when we don't, and we end up being silenced, we end up being like Julian Assange, because nobody, since he went back to Australia, has heard a single squeak out of that man. Because he has got a gagging order on him. He's very likely been threatened with his life. You ever go close to that microphone again, or any social media, and we'll put you back in Belmarsh, or worse. What was his only crime? Telling the truth. There was something done during the Iraq War by the American army that shouldn't have been done, and it was. And it was handed to him, and he reported on it like a true reporter is supposed to do. He's not supposed to be biased. So if you want the truth, we give it you on a few specific subjects on this channel, especially the magnetic poles. And someone said to me, incidentally as well, I'm going to try and wrap this video up after this, I say this, but someone said to me, you know, you do understand that NOAA are publishing the latitude and longitude of the magnetic North Pole right now. So I hadn't checked for a few months, but I knew the truth of this. What they were saying was wrong, because they don't, and I'm sure that they're not even bothered about it. Because if they had a brain, and this is what they rely on with public from any country, they rely on them not being intellectual in that topic that they're talking about. It's like if I start talking to people on here, even that have a very small knowledge on CO2, you know, I'll lose their interest because they don't have the capability of listening and understanding what I'm talking about. You know, that's why it takes 50 videos talking about CO2 to get it through to somebody that doesn't know anything about chemical elements, let alone atmospheric gases. But this is the problems that we face, guys, and it's absolutely wrong. And that's why I've always said you should support us, because we're not giving you bullshit, right? There's no mugs, there's no baseball caps, there's no hoodies, there's no gimmicks, there's no shops. We're not selling camping knives and backpacks. There's none of that. We're just asking you to support what we do in providing information. Yet, look at what the truth is of the world we live in. And that's why people are treated like sheep, because they act. Some people do act like it, unfortunately. I know people won't like hearing that, but it's the truth. People act like sheep. People act like that emblem we're looking at right now, like that mystical animal, the creature, the unicorn, and the lion rules it. And that's how people act. Because otherwise, they would see we don't stand for any bullshit on this channel. We report the truth, or as accurate as we can possibly get it, or point you in a direction of interest where you can find it yourself. Now, there's a lot of people that talk about the magnetic pole now. I was one of the first. It's been going on over a decade. I was one of the first. And the government has censored me, and so is YouTube. Through YouTube's tools, the government have done it. And it was very likely nothing to do with the fact I was reporting on the Pole Shift News. It was more likely to having an opinion on what was going on with Israel on Gaza right now. And if you don't agree with me on what I said about that, then why has the International Court put a warrant out for Netanyahu's arrest? And criminals hang round with criminals. Yeah, we know that Donald Trump's a convicted sex offender. And we know that Bibi Netanyahu goes over to America and doesn't get arrested and given over to the International Court because they're both criminals. You see? Just like Jeffrey Epstein and Gilland, whatever her name is, who's now been removed from a maximum security prison to, you know, a very cushy one. That's why they're losing respect. That's why no one watches mainstream media news anymore, because they see that all this mainstream media news is nothing but a mystical creature like that unicorn. And we, the public, have become the lion that rules. And I'm going to end it there, guys. Link down there if you want to help and support what we talk about and what we do here. You have an amazing day.